The galactic combat arena floated in the void between three dying stars, a massive structure of crystallized dark matter and living metal that pulsed with the heartbeats of 1 million spectators. Inside, beings from every corner of the known universe gathered to witness the greatest fighting tournament in existence. The arena itself was a marvel of engineering, its floor capable of shifting between environments at will, from the methane swamps of Theta Prime to the gravity wells of collapsed neutron stars. Kraxtor, champion of the Valdorian Empire, stood at the center of the arena, his 4 arms crossed over his chitinous chest. Each arm ended in razor-sharp claws that could slice through starship hulls like paper. His compound eyes reflected the light of 1,000 holographic displays showing his previous victories. The crowd roared their approval, a sound that would have liquefied the organs of most species, but Kraxtor merely basked in their adoration. "Who dares challenge the undefeated?" His voice boomed through the translator systems, reaching every being in their native tongue. "I have crushed the stone giants of Proxima. I have torn apart the energy beings of the Void Nexus. There is no warrior in this galaxy who can stand against me." The crowd erupted in cheers. Betting stations flashed with astronomical sums as gamblers wagered on how quickly Kraxtor would destroy his next opponent. The Valdorian had won 47 consecutive matches, each victory more brutal than the last. His species was engineered for war, with redundant organs, accelerated healing, and a neural system that processed combat data faster than most computers. High above in the VIP section, Ambassador Zephyr of the Altarian Confederation leaned back in her hovering chair, her tentacles writhing with amusement. "The humans finally agreed to send a representative," she announced to her companions, her voice dripping with condescension. "Can you imagine? Those soft pink creatures think they can compete here?" The laughter that followed was harsh and mocking. Everyone knew about humans, a young species that had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. They were fragile things, with only 2 arms, no natural armor, and a laughably slow healing rate. Their home planet's gravity was so weak that most species could jump into orbit from its surface. The fact that they had even been allowed to join the Galactic Council was seen as an act of pity by most civilizations. "I heard they need to breathe oxygen," chuckled Gorvac, a silicon-based life form whose body resembled animated rock. "And they can only see a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. How do they even navigate space?" "They use machines for everything," Zephyr replied, her 12 eyes rolling in synchronized disgust. "Machines to breathe, machines to see, machines to fight. They're barely more than parasites clinging to their technology." Down in the fighter preparation chambers, other contestants prepared for their matches. The Nexari twins sharpened their bone blades that grew from their forearms, each blade coated with a neurotoxin that could paralyze a star whale. The quantum shifter from Dimension 7 phased in and out of reality, practicing his technique of attacking from angles that didn't exist in normal space. The living storm crackled with electricity, its body a swirling mass of charged particles held together by will alone. They all paused when they heard the announcement. Next challenger, representative of Earth, Homo sapiens designation, Marcus Chen. The laughter started immediately. Even the other fighters, normally respectful of opponents, couldn't help but mock the idea. The Nexari twins clicked their mandibles in amusement. "A human? They sent a human? Do they want to lose their membership in the council?" "I fought one once," boasted Throck, a warrior from the heavy-gravity world of Densari, "in a bar on Station Prime. I breathed on it too hard and it fell over. Had to pay for its medical treatment. Embarrassing." The arena's environmental controls shifted, creating a neutral atmosphere suitable for most oxygen-breathing species. The crowd settled in for what they expected to be a quick and possibly amusing execution. Some didn't even bother to watch, turning to their personal entertainment feeds instead. After all, how long could a human last? 30 seconds? A minute if Crackstor decided to play with his food? The preparation chamber's blast doors opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Through the swirling mists of atmospheric adjustment stepped a figure that made the crowd fall silent for a moment before bursting into even louder jeers and laughter. Marcus Chen stood just over 6 feet tall, practically a child compared to the 12-foot Crackstor. He wore no visible armor, just a form-fitting black suit that looked like it was made of some kind of fabric. No weapons hung from his belt, no energy shields shimmered around him. He didn't even wear a helmet. Leaving his head exposed with its ridiculous growth of black hair, his skin showed no scales, no chitin, no protective covering of any kind. "Is this a joke?" someone shouted from the crowd. "Where's his exoskeleton?" "Maybe he's the appetizer," another voice called out, causing a wave of laughter to ripple through the stands. Marcus walked calmly to the center of the arena, his movements smooth and measured. His dark eyes took in everything. The crowd, the environmental readings on the displays, the way Crackstor's weight shifted slightly to his rear legs. The human's face showed no fear, no anger at the mockery. Just a quiet, focused intensity that went unnoticed by most of the spectators. Crackstor couldn't believe his luck. After so many challenging fights, the universe had delivered him a gift, an easy victory that would extend his winning streak and humiliate humanity at the same time. The political implications were delicious. Earth would lose standing in the Council. Their trade agreements would be reconsidered, and their colonies would be more vulnerable to aggressive negotiations. "Human." Crackstor addressed Marcus directly, his translator making his words boom across the arena. "Do you understand what you've walked into? This is not some primitive conflict on your backward world. This is combat between the greatest warriors in the galaxy. You don't even have claws." Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm and steady through the translator. "I understand." The simple response caused another wave of laughter. The betting boards updated rapidly, with odds of 10,000 to 1 against the human surviving the first minute. A few desperate gamblers placed tiny bets on the human, hoping for a miracle payout, but most didn't even bother. "Tell me, human," Crackstor continued, enjoying the moment. "What combat modifications does your species possess? Can you spit acid, generate force fields, phase through dimensions?" "No," Marcus replied simply. "Then what makes you think you can fight me?" For the first time, Marcus smiled. It was a small expression, barely noticeable on his flat face, but there was something about it that made Crackstor's hindmost arm twitch involuntarily. "We're very good at fighting," Marcus said. The arena exploded with laughter. Beings slapped appendages together in mirth, some laughing so hard they had to adjust their breathing apparatus. The idea that humans, soft, weak, technologically dependent humans, were good at fighting was the best joke they'd heard in cycles. Ambassador Zephyr wiped tears from several of her eyes. "Good at fighting! They needed nuclear weapons just to get off their own planet. They can't even agree amongst themselves. Their world is divided into hundreds of different nations." But a few observers noticed something odd. The human wasn't boasting or posturing. He wasn't trying to intimidate or impress. He had stated it as a simple fact, like saying water was wet or stars were hot, and his breathing was steady, his heart rate, displayed on the biometric scanners for all to see, was actually dropping. The arena master's voice echoed through the space. "Combatants, prepare for battle. Environmental hazards will be random. Victory conditions, death, submission, or incapacitation. May the strongest warrior prevail." Crackstor spread all 4 arms wide, his claws extending to their full 18-inch length. His secondary hearts began pumping combat stimulants through his system. His compound eyes focused on the human, tracking heat signatures, analyzing muscle tension, calculating optimal attack vectors. Marcus simply shifted his weight slightly, his hands hanging loose at his sides. The countdown began, projected in burning numbers above the arena floor. 10, 9, 8. The The crowd leaned forward despite themselves. Even though they expected a slaughter, there was something compelling about watching any creature face certain death. Some of the more philosophical species wondered if humans understood death the same way. Did they know what was about to happen? 7, 6, 5. Kraxtor's muscles coiled like springs. He would make this quick but memorable. Perhaps he would use only one arm to make it more sporting. Or maybe he would let the human attack first, just to show the futility of it all. 4, 3, 2. Marcus took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving Kraxtor. Around the arena, those few humans who had managed to secure tickets sat quietly among the jeering crowds. They didn't cheer or shout encouragement. They just watched, their expressions unreadable. 1. The signal blazed red, then green. The fight had begun. Kraxtor launched himself forward with explosive force, his forelegs propelling him across the arena floor at speeds that would have appeared as a blur to human eyes. His right upper arm swept in a devastating arc, claws whistling through the air where Marcus had been standing. Had been. The human had moved, not with the supernatural speed of a Nexari or the phase shifting of a quantum being, but with something else. He had simply stepped to the side at exactly the right moment, his movement so efficient that Kraxtor's claw passed within an inch of his face without connecting. The Valdorian's momentum carried him past, and he spun quickly, all 4 arms now coming into play. This time he wouldn't underestimate the human's reflexes. He attacked in a pattern that had defeated dozens of opponents, high, low, left, right, creating a cage of slashing claws that left no room for escape. Marcus moved through the attacks like water flowing around stones. He didn't block or parry, he simply wasn't where the claws were. Each movement was minimal, precise, using exactly as much energy as required and no more. To the crowd, it looked like luck. To Kraxtor, it was beginning to look like something else. The Valdorian increased his speed, his redundant nervous systems pushing his reaction time to its limits. His claws became a silver blur, attack patterns flowing into each other without pause. The air itself seemed to scream as his strikes cut through it. Any other opponent would have been ribbons of flesh by now. But the human kept moving. Step, lean, turn, duck. Each motion flowing into the next without wasted effort. His breathing remained steady. His heart rate, still displayed on the arena's screens, had actually dropped further. "Stand and fight, coward!" Kraxtor roared, frustration beginning to color his voice. Marcus didn't respond. He just kept moving. Those dark eyes watching everything, recording everything. Several observers in the crowd began to notice something strange. The human wasn't running away. He wasn't trying to escape or create distance. He was staying exactly where he needed to be. Always just out of reach. Always in position to move again. The environmental hazards activated. Sections of the floor suddenly became superheated, glowing red with temperatures that could melt steel. Gravity fields fluctuated wildly, quintupling weight in some areas while negating it in others. Toxic gas vents opened randomly, spewing clouds of corrosive vapor. Kraxtor adapted instantly, his engineered body compensating for the changes. His forelegs adjusted to the gravity shifts. His hardened carapace ignored the heat. His filtered respiratory system neutralized the toxins. He pressed his attack, using the hazards to try to corner the human. But Marcus seemed to have mapped the entire arena in his mind. He stepped around the heated sections before they fully activated, adjusted his movement to the gravity changes as if he had expected them, held his breath and closed his eyes seconds before the gas vents opened near him. It wasn't precognition. He was reading the subtle signs, the slight tremors in the floor, the faint hum of the gravity generators, the whisper of gas building pressure in the pipes. The crowd's laughter had died. Now they watched in confused silence as the human continued to evade every attack. Some began to mutter about illegal enhancements. Technological cheating. Surely no baseline human could move like that. But the biometric scanners showed no technological augmentation. Marcus Chen was exactly what he appeared to be, an unmodified human using nothing but his natural abilities, and Kraxtor hadn't landed a single blow. Minutes passed. In the arena, minutes were an eternity. Most fights were decided in seconds, perhaps a minute at most for evenly matched opponents. But 5 minutes in, then 10, the human was still moving, still evading, still watching with those dark, patient eyes. Kraxtor's breathing had become labored. His redundant hearts were pumping at maximum capacity. The combat stimulants in his system were beginning to take their toll, and his movements, while still lightning fast, had lost their initial precision. Sweat, or the Valdorian equivalent, beaded on his carapace. The human hadn't even begun to sweat. High in the VIP section, Ambassador Zephyr's tentacles had gone still. She watched with growing unease as the impossible continued to happen. The human wasn't winning. He hadn't thrown a single attack. But he wasn't losing either. And Kraxtor, the unstoppable champion, was beginning to slow. "How?" Gorvak rumbled, his rocky form grinding with agitation. "How is it still alive?" No one had an answer. They had expected technology, weapons, some trick. But the human was just moving, reading his opponent, analyzing patterns, conserving energy while forcing Kraxtor to expend his. It was so simple it was almost insulting. And it was working. The arena floor shifted again, this time transforming into a maze of pillars that rose from the ground. Kraxtor roared his approval. Now the human would have nowhere to run. He could trap his prey, corner it, finish this embarrassment. But Marcus used the pillars like a three-dimensional chessboard. He flowed between them, over them, around them. When Kraxtor tried to trap him, he was already moving to the next position. When the Valdorian attempted to predict his movement, Marcus changed patterns, introducing chaos into his order just long enough to confuse before returning to efficiency. And then, 15 minutes into the fight, Marcus Chen threw his first attack. It wasn't spectacular. As Kraxtor overextended on a four-armed grab, leaving his lower thorax exposed for a fraction of a second, Marcus stepped in and drove his fist into a specific spot between two armor plates. To the crowd, it looked like nothing, a weak punch from a creature without claws or enhanced strength. Kraxtor stumbled. The champion's rear left leg went numb. Neural feedback screamed through his nervous system. The human had hit some kind of nerve cluster, something that shouldn't have been accessible, something that required precise knowledge of Valdorian anatomy and exactly the right amount of pressure at exactly the right angle. Before Kraxtor could recover, Marcus had already moved away, back to his patient circling. But now there was something different. The human wasn't just evading anymore. He was hunting. The shift in the arena's atmosphere was palpable. Where before there had been mockery and dismissive laughter, now there was a tense silence broken only by the sound of Kraxtor's increasingly labored breathing and Marcus's steady footfalls. The Valdorian champion tried to compensate for his numbed leg, but his movement patterns had changed, become predictable. And the human was watching, always watching. Marcus struck again, this time a palm strike to what appeared to be an armored section of Kraxtor's torso. The crowd expected nothing. How could a soft human hand damage armor that could deflect plasma bolts? But Kraxtor's body seized for a moment, his secondary respiratory system spasming. The human had targeted another vulnerability, using the armor's own rigidity against itself, sending shockwaves through to the organs beneath. "Impossible," someone whispered in the stands. The words spread like wildfire. "Impossible! Impossible! Impossible!" But Marcus Chen was making the impossible look inevitable. Each strike came at the perfect moment, targeted with surgical precision. He wasn't trying to batter through Kraxtor's defenses. He was using the Valdorian's own strength against him, finding the tiny gaps, the nerve clusters, the pressure points that evolution had hidden but not eliminated. The giant screens around the arena began displaying analysis data. Kraxtor's energy expenditure was off the charts. He had burned through more calories in 20 minutes than most fighters used in 5 matches. His redundant organs were working overtime, his healing factor struggling to keep up with the accumulated micro-traumas. Meanwhile, Marcus's readings remained almost baseline. His efficiency was beyond anything in the databases. "He's not fighting," breathed a Nexari observer, her compound eyes wide with realization. "He's persistence hunting." The term sent ripples through the crowd. Persistence hunting was something from primitive worlds, where predators would simply follow prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. It was considered crude, inefficient beneath civilized species. But as they watched Marcus continue his relentless, patient stalking of Kraxtor, they began to understand. Humans hadn't evolved devastating claws or impenetrable armor or energy projection. They had evolved something far more terrifying, the ability to simply not stop, to continue when any reasonable creature would quit, to endure beyond all logical limits. Kraxtor launched another desperate assault, channeling his remaining strength into a berserker charge. His 4 arms windmilled in a pattern that had never failed him, a tornado of death that should have reduced any opponent to paste. But Marcus read the attack before it fully formed, saw the tell in the way Kraxtor's weight shifted, the minute tensing of specific muscle groups. The human dropped low. So low his chest nearly touched the arena floor and swept Kraxtor's damaged leg. For a creature of the Valdorian size and mass to fall was shocking enough. But Marcus didn't let him hit the ground. He rose with the sweep, driving his shoulder into Kraxtor's center of mass, adding his own force to the champion's momentum. Kraxtor flew. The 12-foot, 800-pound warrior sailed through the air and crashed into one of the arena pillars with a sound like thunder. The pillar cracked. So did something in Kraxtor's carapace. The champion struggled to his feet, purple blood oozing from the crack. His compound eyes were wild now, unfocused. Fear had entered them. Not fear of death, but fear of something worse. Fear of being systematically taken apart by a creature that should have been beneath him. "What are you?" Kraxtor gasped, his voice distorted by damage to his vocal cords. Marcus paused in his circling. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across his features. Not cruelty or satisfaction, but something almost like pity. "I'm human," he said simply. "We've been fighting for a very long time." He moved again, and this time the crowd could see what he was doing. Each strike, each movement was building on the previous ones. He was creating a cascade of failures in Kraxtor's body, each small damage making the next more effective. It was combat as engineering, breaking down a complex system by targeting its interconnected weaknesses. In the VIP section, Ambassador Zephyr's skin had paled to a sickly green. She turned to her aide, tentacles trembling. "Get me the xenobiology department, now." "What for, Ambassador?" "I need to know everything about human evolution. Everything we missed, everything we dismissed." Her 12 eyes remained fixed on the arena. "Start with their predator history." The call went through, and soon dozens of xenobiologists across the galaxy were frantically pulling up data on humans. What they found chilled them to their various cores. Humans were persistence predators. On their homeworld, they had hunted by simply following prey until it died of exhaustion. They could regulate their temperature through sweating, allowing them to function in conditions that would cause other species to overheat. They could continue functioning with injuries that would incapacitate others. They healed from wounds that should be permanent, bones growing back stronger at the breakpoints. But that was just the beginning. Human history was a chronicle of warfare that made the conquest-focused Valdorians look peaceful. They had been killing each other with increasing efficiency for hundreds of thousands of years. Every human culture had developed martial arts, systematic methods of destroying other humans using nothing but their bodies. They had turned violence into science, combat into art. And then there was their psychology. Humans could enter something they called a flow state, where time seemed to slow down, where they could process information and react at speeds that shouldn't be possible for their neural architecture. They could push through pain using pure willpower, ignore injuries that would send other species into shock, continue functioning on adrenaline and determination when logic said they should be dead. Back in the arena, Kraxtor was learning these lessons firsthand. His 4 arms, once his greatest advantage, had become liabilities. Each limb Marcus damaged affected the others, throwing off his balance, disrupting his coordination. The redundant organs that should have kept him fighting were overwhelmed by the systematic damage. His engineered healing factor couldn't keep up with injuries inflicted faster than they could repair. Marcus moved in again, this time catching one of Kraxtor's wild swings. The crowd gasped. Catching a Valdorian strike was like trying to stop a spacecraft. But Marcus didn't try to stop it. He redirected it, adding a slight torque that hyperextended the elbow joint. The crack was audible throughout the arena. Kraxtor screamed, a sound that sent sympathetic fear through every warrior watching. One arm hung useless. Then Marcus was inside his guard, delivering a series of strikes so fast the cameras barely caught them. Liver, solar plexus, throat, temple. Each hit targeted something specific, something vital. The champion fell to one knee, then both. His remaining arms tried to protect him, but Marcus systematically broke through each defense. It wasn't brutal. There was no excess force, no cruelty, just the methodical disassembly of the opponent, like an engineer taking apart a machine. "Yield!" Kraxtor wheezed through his damaged throat. The word was barely audible, but Arena's systems amplified it. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in shocked exclamations. Kraxtor, the undefeated, terror of the void, had yielded to a human, to a creature without claws or armor or energy weapons. But Marcus didn't step back. He circled the kneeling Valdorian, those dark eyes still watching, still analyzing. The arena master's voice boomed out. "Champion Kraxtor has yielded. Victory to—" "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the announcement. "He hasn't yielded." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Kraxtor had clearly said the words, but Marcus continued to circle, continued to watch. And then everyone saw what he had seen, the minute tensing of muscles, the slight shift in weight, the way Kraxtor's functioning arms were positioning. The Valdorian exploded from his kneeling position, his yield a deception, a desperate gambit to catch the human off guard. His remaining 3 arms swept in arcs calculated to be unavoidable, his legs pushed off with force that cracked the arena floor. Marcus had already moved. The human flowed around the attack like smoke, and as Kraxtor's momentum carried him forward, Marcus struck one final time. His hand shot out, fingers rigid, striking a point at the base of the Valdorian's skull where the primary nervous system connected to the redundant backups. It was a target the size of a coin, protected by overlapping armor plates, accessible only from one specific angle at one specific moment. Marcus hit it perfectly. Kraxtor's body went rigid, then limp. He crashed to the arena floor and didn't move. He wasn't dead. The biomonitors showed his life signs clearly, but he was completely paralyzed. His own redundant systems turned against him, locked in a feedback loop that would take hours to resolve. The arena fell silent. 50,000 beings from across the galaxy stared at the small human standing over the fallen champion. Marcus wasn't even breathing hard. His suit was unmarked, not a single tear or scuff. He had defeated the greatest warrior in known space without taking a single hit. "Victory to Marcus Chen of Earth," the arena master announced, voice subdued with shock. The silence stretched. Then, from somewhere high in the stands, came the sound of slow clapping. It was joined by another, then another. Soon the entire arena was applauding, not the raucous cheering of Bloodsport fans, but the respectful acknowledgement of witnessing something unprecedented. Marcus looked up at the crowd, then down at Kraxtor. He knelt beside the paralyzed champion and spoke quietly, his words picked up by the arena's systems. Your fourth arm drops 2 degrees when you're about to use your acceleration burst. Your rear left leg bears 12% more weight when you're planning a spinning attack. Your secondary heart rate increases by 7 beats before you commit to a full assault. He paused. You're an excellent fighter. But you've never had to think about fighting. It's all instinct and engineering for you. He stood and began walking toward the arena exit. But the crowd wasn't done. Questions erupted from all sections. How had he done it? What was his secret? What enhancements did Earth possess? Marcus stopped at the exit and turned back. The arena screens focused on his face, broadcasting it to the galaxy. You want to know our secret? He smiled that same small smile. We're not the strongest. We're not the fastest. We don't have the best natural weapons. The smile faded, replaced by something harder. But we've been killing each other for 200,000 years. We've turned war into science, combat into art, death into philosophy. Every human child learns to throw a punch. Every human studies war, even if they never fight. It's in our stories, our games, our dreams. He paused, letting the words sink in. You evolved as warriors. We evolved as killers. And we got very, very good at it. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Around the galaxy, military advisors and strategic planners began reassessing every assumption they'd made about humans. The soft, pink creatures they'd dismissed as barely civilized had just revealed themselves as something far more dangerous. But Marcus wasn't finished. That's why we work so hard for peace. Why we formed the Earth Coalition, why we prefer trade to war, diplomacy to conflict, because we know what we're capable of. We know what happens when humans truly go to war. He looked directly at one of the cameras. So here's my message to the galaxy. We came here in peace. We want to remain at peace. But if you force us to fight... He gestured to the still paralyzed Kraxtor. We've had a lot of practice. As Marcus walked into the tunnel leading from the arena, medical teams rushed to tend to Kraxtor. The paralysis would wear off, his injuries would heal, but the fear in his compound eyes when he looked at the departing human's back, that would remain much longer. In the VIP section, Ambassador Zephyr turned to her aides. Cancel all aggressive negotiations with Earth colonies, immediately. But Ambassador, the Council can watch the replay. Her tentacles writhed with agitation. And send a message to the military committee. Tell them we need to reassess the human threat level. To what level, Ambassador? She watched the human disappear into the tunnel, remembering his words. We evolved as killers. Maximum, she whispered, and pray to whatever gods you believe in that they really do prefer peace. The arena began to empty, but the implications of what had happened continued to ripple outward. News feeds across the galaxy led with the story. Military academies began studying the fight frame by frame. Xenobiologists dove deep into human evolution, uncovering more disturbing facts with each discovery. Humans had wars that killed millions of their own kind, and they considered these tragedies not glorious victories. They had developed weapons that could destroy their entire planet, and then decided not to use them. They had martial arts styles numbering in the hundreds, each designed to exploit different weaknesses in the human form. They studied anatomy not just to heal, but to know exactly where to strike. But perhaps most terrifying was the discovery of human persistence. Other species fought until exhaustion or injury forced them to stop. Humans had something called second wind, They had records of humans continuing to function with injuries that would kill other species outright. Mothers lifting vehicles to save their children, soldiers fighting for hours with mortal wounds, athletes pushing through pain that should have been incapacitating. They called it mind over matter, as if it were normal to simply decide that physics and biology didn't apply to them. The other fighters scheduled for the tournament began withdrawing, not out of fear exactly, but out of a sudden need to reassess their training methods. The Nixari twins claimed a religious obligation. The quantum shifter discovered urgent business in another dimension. Even the living storm, which technically didn't have emotions, found reasons to be elsewhere. And through it all, Marcus Chen sat quietly in the humans section of the station, sipping what the food synthesizer claimed was tea. Other humans had begun arriving, drawn by news of his victory. They didn't celebrate or boast. They just nodded to each other with the quiet understanding of those who shared a secret. The secret was simple. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability or their endurance or even their intelligence. It was that they knew they were weak. They had always known. And so they had spent their entire evolutionary history finding ways to win anyway. When you can't rely on natural advantages, you have to get creative. When you're soft and fragile, you have to be smart. When you're facing stronger, faster, better-armed opponents, you have to find their weaknesses and exploit them without mercy. Humans hadn't conquered their planet by being the apex predator. They'd done it by being the most dangerous prey that ever evolved into a predator. They remembered being hunted, and so they had learned to hunt better than anything else in the cosmos. As news of the fight spread, something changed in how the galaxy viewed humanity. The jokes stopped. The dismissive attitudes vanished. Trade negotiations suddenly became much more favorable to human interests. Border disputes were resolved peacefully, usually in humanity's favor. No one wanted to test whether Marcus Chen was an exceptional human or a typical one. No one wanted to find out what would happen if humanity decided that peace was no longer profitable. The soft pink creatures had shown a glimpse of what lurked beneath their diplomatic smiles, and it was enough. But in the quiet corners of military planning rooms and strategic think tanks, a new question was being asked. If one human could do this in single combat, what could an army of them accomplish? What technologies of war had they developed and hidden? What strategies had they conceived during their centuries of constant conflict? The humans, for their part, continued to smile and trade and negotiate. They spoke of peace and cooperation and mutual benefit. But now, when they sat at negotiating tables, their counterparts couldn't help but notice the way human diplomats watched everyone in the room, the way they automatically noted exits and defensive positions, the way their eyes tracked movement with the same patient, predatory focus that Marcus Chen had shown in the arena. Humanity wanted peace. They genuinely, desperately wanted peace. But they were very, very good at the alternative. 3 months after the fight that changed everything, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate representatives from over 10,000 civilizations, hummed with nervous energy. At the center of it all sat the human delegation, no longer relegated to the outer rings reserved for minor species, but given a position of prominence that reflected their new status. Admiral Sarah Chen, Marcus's grandmother and Earth's military attaché, sat with perfect stillness as debate raged around her. The Valdorian Empire had proposed a resolution. Humans should be banned from the combat arena, their fighting methods classified as biological weapons. It was a desperate attempt to save face after Kraxtor's defeat, but it had found surprising support. The human displayed abilities that defy classification, insisted the Valdorian speaker, his forearms gesturing emphatically. No unaugmented being should be able to process information at that speed, to strike with such precision, to endure for so long. We demand investigation into illegal enhancements. The Altarian ambassador, Zephyr, raised several tentacles for attention. The biometric scans were clear. The human used no technological enhancements, no chemical augmentation, no genetic modification beyond their natural evolution. That is precisely what makes them so. She paused, searching for the right word. Concerning. A ripple of agreement passed through the assembly. In the months since the fight, every military force in the galaxy had been forced to revise their threat assessments of humanity. What they discovered had shaken the foundations of their understanding. The Nexari hive mind spoke through their dozen representatives in perfect unison. We have analyzed human military history, their world wars, their cold wars, their tactical doctrines. They have developed strategies for every conceivable form of warfare: nuclear, biological, chemical, psychological, economic, informational. They plan for conflicts we haven't even imagined. And yet, Admiral Chen finally spoke, her voice cutting through the noise with the same precision her grandson had shown in the arena. We choose peace. The chamber fell silent. When humans spoke in the council now, others listened. Chen continued, "Yes, we are effective fighters. Yes, we have a violent history. But that history taught us something most of you haven't learned yet. The true cost of war. We've seen cities turn to glass, populations erased, entire ecosystems destroyed. We've watched our children die in conflicts over resources, ideology, religion, or simply because someone drew a line on a map differently." She stood, and though she was smaller than most of the beings present, her presence filled the space. We developed nuclear weapons and used them once. The horror of it shaped our species. We created biological weapons that could end all life on our planet, and then we agreed never to use them. We built enough conventional weapons to kill every human 50 times over, and then we started dismantling them. "But you kept the knowledge," accused the Proximan delegate, its crystalline form chiming with agitation. "You still teach your children to fight. Your entertainment glorifies violence. Your sports are barely disguised combat training." Chen smiled, and several delegates unconsciously leaned back. It was the same smile her grandson had worn in the arena. Of course we kept the knowledge. Those who forget how to fight are the first to be conquered. But we channel it differently now. Our martial arts teach discipline and respect. Our sports teach teamwork and fair play. Our entertainment lets us explore conflict without bloodshed. She gestured to a holographic display that materialized above the chamber. It showed human children in a schoolyard, playing what looked like a war game. This is what you fear. Children playing capture the flag, learning strategy and tactics. But look closer. The display zoomed in. The children were laughing, helping opponents who had fallen, arguing about rules but accepting group decisions. When the game ended, both teams shook hands. We teach our children to compete fiercely but fairly, to fight hard but honor their opponents, to win with humility and lose with grace. Because we know that today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally, and every conflict ends with someone having to live with someone else. The display changed, showing human history, wars, yes, but also their aftermaths, enemies becoming allies, rebuilt cities, former adversaries working together, the Marshall Plan, the European Union, the Earth Coalition itself, formed from nations that had spent centuries killing each other. "You want to ban us from your arena because we're too good at fighting?" Chen asked. "We'll accept that. We never wanted to be there in the first place. We sent Marcus only because you insisted, because you threatened our trade status if we didn't participate in your cultural exchange." Guilty silence from several delegations confirmed this. "But understand this," Chen continued. "Banning us won't make us weaker. Fearing us won't make us your enemy. We are exactly what we've always claimed to be, a species that wants to explore, to trade, to learn, to grow. We offer our friendship freely. But Her voice hardened. We will defend ourselves if threatened, and as you've seen, we're very good at it. The Gorvani admiral, a veteran of a dozen interstellar conflicts, spoke up. You speak of peace, but your colony ships carry weapons. Your trade vessels have military-grade shields. Your diplomats travel with bodyguards who could probably conquer small planets. Because we're not naive, Chen replied simply. We hope for peace, but prepare for war. It's a human saying, si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. We'd rather be overprepared and never need it than underprepared and lose everything. And if someone attacks you? Asked a voice from the back. If someone decides to test whether all humans are like Marcus Chen? Admiral Chen's expression grew somber. Then they'll learn why we work so hard for peace, why we prefer trade to conquest, diplomacy to destruction. They'll learn what total war means to a species that's been perfecting it for millennia. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. We don't conquer planets. We break the will to fight. We don't destroy armies. We remove the ability to wage war. We don't rule through fear. We make fear unnecessary by removing threats completely and permanently. That sounds like a threat, the Valdorian speaker said, though his voice lacked conviction. No, Chen said firmly. It's a promise. Attack us, and we will defend ourselves with everything we are. Leave us in peace, and we will be your strongest allies, your most reliable trade partners, your most innovative collaborators. The choice has always been yours. She sat back down, and the chamber erupted in discussion. But the decision, when it came, was unanimous. Humanity would not be banned from the combat arena. They would be given a permanent exemption, a recognition that they had transcended the need to prove their warrior status. It was framed as an honor, but everyone knew it was really a relief. As the council session ended, Ambassador Zephyr approached Admiral Chen. May I ask you something, Admiral? Off the record? Chen nodded. Your grandson, Marcus, is he exceptional among humans, or? Marcus is a very good fighter, Chen said carefully. He studied hard, trained diligently, and has excellent control. But exceptional? She shrugged. He placed third in his division at the Earth Combat Championships. He's good, but he's not even close to our best. Zephyr's chromatic skin paled. Third? He defeated our greatest champion and he's... third? In his weight class, in his age group, in one particular style, Chen confirmed. We have hundreds of martial arts, thousands of masters, millions who train regularly. Marcus is very good, but on Earth he's just... good. As the human delegation departed, Zephyr stood frozen in place, her mind racing through the implications. If Marcus Chen was merely good by human standards, what were their exceptional fighters capable of? What could their military forces accomplish if truly unleashed? The news of Admiral Chen's revelation spread quickly through diplomatic channels. Within days, several border disputes involving human colonies were quietly resolved in humanity's favor. Trade agreements were renegotiated with surprisingly generous terms. The occasional raids on human shipping by pirate factions stopped entirely. On Earth, Marcus Chen returned to his job as a trauma surgeon, his brief moment of galactic fame already fading into memory for most humans. But he still received messages from across the galaxy, some thanking him for showing restraint, others asking for training, and a few from former opponents wanting to understand how they'd been defeated. To all of them, he sent the same response. The first lesson of human martial arts is this: the best fight is the one you avoid. The second lesson is, if you can't avoid it, end it as quickly and efficiently as possible. The third lesson is, respect your opponent, for they teach you your own weaknesses. It was this philosophy that perhaps scared the galaxy most of all. Humans didn't revel in their violence. They studied it, understood it, mastered it, and then tried their very best never to use it. They were the galaxy's most dangerous pacifists, warriors who chose peace not from weakness, but from wisdom. A year later, the combat arena was forced to restructure. Attendance had dropped dramatically as audiences realized they'd been watching amateurs compared to what true combat looked like. Several species began sending representatives to Earth, asking to study at human martial arts schools. They were welcomed, but what they learned there often disturbed them more than the fighting techniques. Human dojos taught discipline before strength, wisdom before technique. Students spent months learning to fall safely before throwing their first punch. They meditated on the responsibility that came with the ability to harm others. They studied anatomy not just to find weak points, but to understand the damage they could cause and why they should avoid causing it. One Valdorian student training at a school in Japan asked his sensei why they spent so much time on philosophy when they could be fighting. The old woman looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Because, young warrior, any fool can learn to break bones. It takes wisdom to know when not to. We create warriors not to wage war, but to prevent it. The true master is one who never needs to demonstrate their mastery." "But what if someone forces you to fight?" She smiled sadly. "Then you remind them why humans pray for peace. You show them that we have looked into the abyss of total war and turned away, not from fear, but from understanding. And if they still insist," she shrugged, "then you do what must be done, quickly, efficiently, and with as little suffering as possible. That is the burden of those who truly understand violence." The galaxy had learned to fear human warriors, but what truly changed everything was learning to respect human restraint. They weren't peaceful because they were weak. They were peaceful because they were strong enough to choose peace, wise enough to value it, and dangerous enough to enforce it. In the great libraries of the galaxy, scholars began studying human history with new eyes. They found tales of warriors who became poets, soldiers who became healers, generals who planted gardens. They found a species that had weaponized everything from atoms to information, and then decided that the greatest victory was the war you didn't have to fight. And in a quiet moment of reflection, the galaxy's leaders understood the unspoken message Marcus Chen had delivered in that arena. Humans had not conquered their violent nature. They had something far more dangerous. They had mastered it. They held the leash of their own monsters, and they held it tight. The combat arena still held fights, but now there was a new rule, unspoken but universally understood. You could challenge anyone you wished, but think very carefully before challenging a human. Not because you would lose, though you would, but because in defeating you, they would show such perfect, terrible efficiency that you would understand just how much they were holding back in every other interaction. Humanity's place in the galaxy was secured not by the strength of their weapons or the size of their fleets, but by a single, soft-spoken surgeon who had demonstrated that the most dangerous beings in the universe were the ones who had the power to destroy you utterly and chose not to. Years passed. Trade flourished, alliances strengthened, and whenever disputes arose, negotiators found that simply having a human mediator in the room, not threatening, just present, just watching with those patient, analyzing eyes, was enough to encourage reasonable solutions. The galaxy had wanted to see human fighters. They had seen one, and it had changed everything. Not because humans were invincible, they could be killed as easily as anyone else, but because they had turned survival into science, conflict into art, and chosen to use that knowledge for peace. Marcus Chen never fought in the arena again. He didn't need to. His single victory had sent a message across the stars. Humans were here. They wanted peace. They would have it one way or another. And the galaxy, in a moment of collective wisdom, decided that peace with humanity was infinitely preferable to the alternative. The soft, pink creatures from a backwater planet had become the galaxy's most respected citizens, not through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that they could conquer if they chose to. They chose not to, and that choice, more than any display of force, changed everything. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was not in the arena, but in the fact that they never had to enter it again. They had shown their strength and chosen their path. The galaxy understood and the galaxy agreed. Let the humans have their peace. It was, after all, what they were fighting for all along.